Hi there, this is Coach Red Pill, and I'm joined today with Teal Deer. Teal Deer, it's a pleasure having you on. If you guys don't know him, he's a YouTube legend. Say hello, Teal Deer. How's it going?
Hi. I'm not sure if that's a suitable entrance for a legend. I would contest that title myself. Just more some guy in a corner somewhere.
Well, I think that you're way too modest because one of the things that Teal Deer has, for those of you, two or three people on the face of YouTube who don't know, he has consistently phenomenal content that is just thought-provoking and just wonderful. And it's a pleasure having you on, and thank you for being here. I just want to dive right into it because before we started this hangout, mentioned an idea that you had for a potential video, and the title alone was spectacular. And if you don't mind, could you tell us that title and let's dive into that?
Yes, it's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, so I'm not gonna try and attribute it to someone because I'll inevitably get it wrong and drama will be sparked. But the idea was, the quote, "I'm not alt-right, but soon will be," end quote.
That's just begging for an answer. I myself have an idea about that, but I'd really like to listen to your ideas first. And first of all, do you happen to know where you heard of it and a little bit of background of that sentence?
No, I really can't remember whom said that. I think it's been said by quite a few people by this point in time anyway. But it's the idea that there are certain topics which are becoming completely verboten outside of basically alt-right. Like they have become alt-right talking points, even when they're not actually alt-right talking points. Things like the idea of just acknowledging that races exist. Just any sort of analysis of genetic populations. Now, there are people outside of the alt-right who will address these topics. I mean, I do it. I know Stardust here on YouTube does it as well. There was a video I was watching recently. Who was it? It was Justicar, and he was actually bringing up a lot of left-wing academics who have talked about the concept of race and things like that before, and the idea of subspecies and the ways that we can classify people and the things that we know about differences between those populations, and how we can sort of say, okay, you're kind of from here, you're from here, we have various medical reasons for this, and so on and so forth. But because these topics are really kind of verboten, especially on the left and quite a lot in the center, you've got people who are not in the alt-right. They're not necessarily on board with like the whole ethno-nationalist thing, which seems to permeate a fair amount of that general side of things. And they'll talk about it quite happily, but as a result, you then get backlash against that. It's, oh, you're being racist. You're clearly alt-right. You're supporting all of these things. It's like, no, this is just something which I found interesting. But you end up sort of being lumped in with the alt-right anyway, and that's what so that point of that quote is just, I'm not alt-right, but soon will be, because you kind of end up in that situation where it's like, well, I don't really have a choice. This is the only place where you can even discuss this idea.
Yeah, that's exactly what has happened to me, because I find myself increasingly sympathetic to the alt-right, precisely because they're the only people who are talking about the things that matter. I personally would like them to start talking not so much about race and race and genetics, which I think is just an intellectual dead end, because yes, we know that there are differences between races. Yes, on average, different races have different qualities and different metrics that we care to examine. So, what are you going to do about that? There's nothing to be done about that. What I'd be interested in is in them of social policy and economic policy, because I think that right now, due to the neoliberal paradigm that we currently have, neither party, neither the left nor the right or the center, is thinking outside of the current box. Everybody seems intellectually very imprisoned insofar as social policy and especially economic policy. Because I don't think that the current brand of capitalism, which is a kind of cronyistic, corporatist government patronage system. It's not capitalism, but the system that we have, nobody thinks that it can be changed or even that it should be changed. And I'm thinking of fundamental changes in a radically different direction. I'm not talking about communism, of course. I'm rabidly communist rather, because of my own personal history, and I know what communist regimes can turn into. Eventually, they all become despotic, and there must be a third way, and I'm trying to find a third way. I've been looking at the distributists, which is, G.K. Chesterton and that Catholic idea of erasing the differences between capital and labor, but that's for another conversation. What I'm interested in is the alt-right. They are talking about things that should be talked about, but nobody has the gumption or the nerve to talk about them because everybody is so afraid of the social repercussions of talking about some of this stuff. The alt-right, for me, is extremely attractive. It seems like the only kids on the block who are talking about things that actually matter, or that allow the space to be talking about things that actually matter. My only disagreement, frankly, with the alt-right on a personal level is that I think the notion of an ethno-state is ridiculous. I don't think that ethno-states as a practical reality is ever going to happen. And to be, pining for it is stupid. But again, that's for a different conversation. The fact that they are talking about things that matter is attractive to me. Does this make any sense to you?
Yeah. The only thing that I might say is I think actually the talking about ethnostates can actually be something that is something that needs to be put on the table. And I say that because when it comes to this is actually, again, it's a conversation which I had with Stardust a few weeks ago, or maybe a week ago now, about the idea of people's right to exist, or the idea that cultures have not an inherent value, because I don't think that they do have an inherent value, no. But that we could potentially measure a society sort of by the value that culture brings, not only to itself, but to the world in general. So if you wanted to sort of look like that, you could start saying, well, Western world has given you democracy, it's given you markets which actually work, it's given you loads of technological advancements, so advancements in art and all sorts of things like that. You'd look at places in the East, China, Japan, again, very long, complex lineages of culture. And again, also quite a lot of development there, and a lot of development that has not only benefited them as nations, but also expanded outside themselves. Then you look at, say, Black culture in Africa, which has...
yes, we know.
They bred a strain of wheat. Actually has less of a yield than the wild wheat, but they bred it. It was bred on the continent of Africa, so yeah, that's a thing. I mean, and this is then brings us on to the other point. Looking at why different cultures have developed in different areas, which I think is a really, really interesting thing, because we know that there are genetic ties to things like intelligence. We know that there are genetic ties to things like personality. So when it comes to IQ, about 0.5 to 0.7 of the difference can be explained by heritability. Personality, it's about 0.5. So you're looking at basically half as a baseline of things which are of the differences between people as being heritable things. Now, we're also looking at research now, which is looking at various alleles to do with specific personality traits. Now, some of these can be really quite mundane. So I've got a video on this somewhere about addictive personalities, and it requires a specific component on allele 1, allele 2, and then a serotonin, I think it was serotonin deficiency in the spinal fluid. And if all of those things are put together, then you end up with someone who has an addictive personality. Now, obviously, that's got some genetic triggers to it because you're looking directly at alleles there. The serotonin thing can either be genetic or can be caused by an environmental trigger. But then you're looking at that and you're sort of saying, okay, so we've got these alleles which with this other condition predispose someone to an addictive personality. Now, you can control the environment and to sort of try and mitigate that effect. But even in controlled environments, you're going to find things to be addicted to. Now, what happens if you have a population where the frequency of those alleles is really, really high, and another area, like completely geographically removed, like two different islands, and on one island we've got these two alleles knocking around, which are really, really quite common, and on the other island, they don't exist, or they exist in a really, really low frequency. Well, all other things being equal, you're going to see two different societies rise. And this is just basically simple odds here. You've got a bunch of people who are more disposed to becoming addicted to things, and a bunch of people who are less disposed to becoming addicted to things. Now, obviously, you can talk all about how well you can control the environment and all of that stuff, and sure, yeah, you could. But the odds are that that's not going to happen. You're still going to end up with some people over here with a higher propensity and some people over here with a lower propensity. And if all resources are completely equally spread across the environment, I wouldn't be surprised if you ended up with a population using a kind of resource in a different way to the other one. So let's say they both had access to nicotine. You might find that one of those societies then ends up with, say, a heavy smoking culture, or a heavy, I'm not sure what you'd call it, but there is a practice where you basically take large plugs of nicotine, you stick them in your gums, and it just releases through it.
Chewing tobacco.
Yeah, basically, except they distill it down, so it's basically like pure nicotine in a paste, and it looks something like wasabi, and it's absolutely insane.
I've never heard of that, and I'm curious to try it.
You will become an addict after one little plug of it. Apparently, there's some culture, I can't remember where it is, but that is the norm. It's like you see kids walking around with these things the size of their finger shoved in their cheeks, and it's like, okay, wow, that's crazy. I'd actually wonder whether these alleles are quite prominent in that population. It'd be very interesting to do a study on that.
Well, if you think about it, haven't you noticed that, I have this silly mug that I bought in Amsterdam airport, I think, okay? And it had it's a pro-EU mug. And it was interesting because, it was, multiculturalism, but at the same time, it had kind of like a little figure for each country, and it'd say, as cheap as a Dutchman, as ostentatious as a Frenchman. I forget. It was like a whole bunch of adjectives. But we all recognize that in different countries there are certain characteristics of the people that seem to a higher proportion to that population. For instance, certain countries have the reputation for being miserly, and when you happen to meet people from that country, they do happen to be more miserly. And you could argue that maybe it's the culture. Well, nature, nurture, we could go forever. But if it happens to be, a personality trait based on inheritance, well, we see it all the time, and we don't have much of a problem with it. Not like the negative traits or certain populations that we feel are protected. And I think that that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And this is where we sort of start talking about how societies, basically from whence does culture come? Well, it has to come from somewhere. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. Obviously, it is a, what's the word? It is a, when something comes from something else, they're a product. Bloody hell, I forget words left, right, and center these days. But it's ultimately a product of humanity, which is sort of a product of its genes. If you'd like a slightly more technical way of phrasing it, you could say that culture is the visible phenotype of the humans put out on the environment.
Academics responded.
Yes, there you go. Please respond. Okay, I'll respond. So that's sort of one way of thinking about it. And then we're starting to identify all of these different genes, different alleles, which are linked to propensities for certain behavior. Now, we had the addiction one, which is actually not very controversial. You can usually bring them up to people and they'll go, oh, that kind of makes sense why some people have addictive personalities and some don't, and why addiction seems to run in families and so on and so forth. It's not very contentious. But there's been some alleles identified to do with social sensitivity, and these alleles manifest more in East Asian populations than they do anyone else. Now, obviously, there's different environments, there's slightly different cultures all around there, but those alleles are still higher in frequency in that area. Well, how do we then see that phenotype being projected out onto the environment? Well, you get the honor cultures of the Far East. You get everything is about your honor and respecting people and doing things for the community, and generally it's more collectivist than in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry to butt in a little bit, but Samurai Squirrel very kindly donated $10, and he asks you the following question, and I'll read it. Hey, Teal dear, hypothetically, if one wanted to use opiates, be it codeine or even morphine for pain management, is it possible to be responsible with those, or should one just say no to everything? That's off topic, but it's interesting. What do you say to that?
But yeah, of course you can use them responsibly. I'm on prescription opiates. I use them responsibly. I only use them when I have severe amounts of pain. There's some days where I have a lot of pain owing to a medical condition, and I'll take them every 4 hours as prescribed. And there's days when I have less pain where I might only take them in the morning and at night when the condition is worse. So of course you can use them responsibly.
Yeah, I myself have never been big into opiates, but I was a fairly heavy drug user when I was a teenager, and I was big into LSD. Retrospectively, I think that, yeah, you can use drugs in a responsible manner. My only experience with opiates has been with, I once was given morphine because I had kidney stones. And it was the most dreadful. What? Yeah, the cleanest high. No, the cleanest high I've ever experienced. It was unbelievable. It was just like no side effect whatsoever except this bliss. It was unbelievable.
It's so wonderful. I have had to have it because actually I'm not sure why I had to have it. It was I'm not sure whether it was a stomach virus or something like that, but yeah, I was just in hospital for about a week, and it was the best week of my life. Nothing mattered. Nothing. It was so amazing. And the thing is, I came out and I was like, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, again, talking about responsible use. I walked out of that hospital and I was like, if I could have morphine again, it would be nice, but I don't feel some need to be like, oh, I really want it. I need more of it. And I was on that stuff for about 6 or 7 days. Just didn't get addicted to it. It's like,
well,
okay.
My thing has been gambling, that I've always found it very interesting because, like, I enjoy gambling very much. And when I'm at a table, I can be there for hours, and I have sometimes been at a table for days, literally. But the thing is, see, I can walk away and not think about it for weeks or months or even years, as a matter of fact. I suppose I'm, which one is it? I not obsessive. I don't think about it. Once I walk away and forget about it. And I think it's some personalities that can be very obsessive and focused on something, but then just walk away from it. I don't know how you call that personality, or the inverse, the kind of personality that needs it all the time and thinks about it all the time. Anyway, but I don't understand addictions, to tell you the truth. I've smoked since I was a teenager. I really need. Sometimes I go for a few years without smoking a cigarette or a cigar. And other times I go through periods where I'm smoking all the time. And so it seems to run in families, because in my own family, nobody's addicted to anything. Whereas I've heard families of people whom I know and know well, where everybody was addicted. To think that there's not some sort of genetic component to that is, I think, ridiculous. And I wonder, what is the use of addiction? I mean, I have no idea. I'm just throwing that question out at random. But would there be some sort of use, evolutionarily speaking, to have an addictive personality?
Yes and no. Yes, because in times of resource scarcity, it kind of makes you a little compulsive towards maybe gathering one particular thing or engaging in one particular behavior. So, for instance, let's say you've got enough food taken care of, but you're really obsessively into sex. Well, that's great. That's going to ensure you reproduce a hell of a lot. So there are reasons why it would be good, but in modern society where everything is really, really plentiful, it's generally quite a maladaptation, which is why it's a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you have access to the things that you can become addicted to, as opposed to having that slight addictive personality, getting something and then being like, well, it's the end of the season for that plant, so I'm not going to see it again for another 10 or 11 months.
Yeah. Anyway, pulling back a little bit and going back to your original question about the alt-right.
Yes, I suppose I should actually finish that point before we got sidetracked, shouldn't I?
Yeah, because it's really fascinating, and we got a little bit sidetracked.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Okay. So we were talking about these alleles for social sensitivity, which manifest more often in East Asian populations as opposed to anywhere else, and that's why those areas seem to have more collectivized means of doing things. You have more honor culture, more do things for the family, more sense of duty and obligation. Even the fact that things like communism do quite well around there as well. So that's where you sort of start getting to uncomfortable truths when it would come to the things like the concept of ethnostates and whatnot. Because at that point, the question then becomes, is culture, or can culture ever be removed from the people who manifest that culture? And if there's certain facets of cultures, or if there's certain facets of culture which are influenced from the basal genetic level of the population, then you have to come to the conclusion that some people might not like, that the culture that is around you is the product of the people, and that therefore people and culture are inextricably linked. And that therefore, if you want a culture to continue to exist, the people who create that culture, from the people from whence that culture is made manifest, must then continue to exist.
That doesn't logically follow. Because there could be a culture that has been created by one set of people that is adopted in toto by a different set of people. Couldn't there?
Well, that's the point of contention there. And this is the point which I'm trying to still work out. Because there seem to be certain facets of culture which can be picked up and dropped. But when you look at the fact that there are genes which seem to indicate propensities for certain patterns of behavior, then the question becomes, the rate at which that behavior is manifest within a certain area, if you then removed a certain number of people with those genes, would then that culture still be able to continue?
Yeah,
this is where it becomes really awkward, because it's kind of like, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, let me backtrack a second, because I objected to your saying that only the people who had created the culture could continue that culture. But your argument, your larger argument, saying that a specific culture comes from a specific people, I completely agree with that. And to say that those specific people, because of their geographic isolation, will tend to wind up having certain characteristics. Forgive the use of the word that makes people sometimes queasy. Certain characteristics that have been bred into them, and this will express itself or manifest itself in a particular culture, right? I completely agree with that part of your statement, of your argument. The part of the argument that I'm not sure is that, well, why is it that only those people who originated the culture can continue the culture? Because we have seen certain populations of immigrants who have successfully joined a particular population. For instance, the Irish and Italian and Ukrainian mass immigration, 19th century, early 20th century in the United States,
where they were able to successfully integrate into the famous melting pot. And they did add certain elements to the culture, apart from like silly, obvious things like pizza, but also certain attitudes in different areas of society that have expressed themselves differently over time. But the Jewish population, for instance, from Ukraine, has noticeably influenced the U.S. culture over time. But that's my point. I mean, a culture can exist. First of all, culture is never static, and so why couldn't it be that other populations sort of like take up the mantle of that culture and carry it forward?
Yeah. Now, again, this is where the things sort of start getting complex.
Right.
Because when you let's take the Murica example. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different cultures and different genetic populations all coming together in one area. Mm-hmm. And it's, well, they did eventually create a culture that became one thing. Okay. How much strife and resistance was there to that process in the beginning? But then over how much time did those populations basically genetically meld together to then form a culture which isn't like any of the origin points? It's not those three cultures, it's a fourth culture. Possibly because, you know, if we were to accept that certain cultural traits spring from certain genetic triggers, then that would then perhaps explain why this fourth culture evolved apart from these other three, because it was three effectively genetic pools which merged together into one, thus increasing the allele, the frequency of certain genetic expressions and decreasing the frequency of others.
A little bit of a macro question. Why is it that the argument insofar as the alt-right, always they wind up talking about genetics? I feel like a fool because my background, my academic background is not in biology or the adjacent social sciences. And so I'm like, I feel a little bit like a dumb monkey, watching as all the smart humans talk about stuff that I have no idea about, right? And I'm not, and less interested, to tell you the truth. The argument or the discussion of the alt-right move in a more interesting direction in terms of stuff that actually affects us, because it seems as if everybody's arguing about the reality of race, which seems absurd prima facie, because race exists and whether we like it or not, and there are different races, and that's that. And that the conversation keeps devolving into matters of biology. I mean, you've looked around the YouTube, you've seen all the argumentation and because of it, certain scandals that have broken out recently over this stuff of biology. Why the biology? Is it a quest for certainty, a quest for scientific certainty that that this position, this political position, is absolutely untouchable? Is that what's basically going on?
I have no idea. I can't tell you why. So some people get really, really hung up on it. I think it's just ultimately because biology is inextricable from humans. Like you can't remove it. Mm-hmm. And as I think certain facets of biology become more known to us, for example, the social sensitivity allele frequency being higher in East Asians, we're maybe starting to realize that the very cultures that surround us aren't things which have just come out of nowhere. Like they had to have an origin point. And what that then starts really putting into people's minds is then, can we take multiple populations and mix them all together and still expect the original culture to continue? And obviously, if the cultural differences stem from some biological triggers, and obviously I'm not going to sit here and say all culture stems from the biology thing. No, obviously there will be learned patterns and things which are carried on because tradition is a thing. That is part of the environmental pressure feedback loop onto the genes.
Right.
But then we start getting that uncomfortable thing where it's like, well, you can't just throw people together and expect one culture to remain the same way. And that seems to be the problem that we're hitting, especially in places like Europe at the moment, where there's mass immigration from third world countries coming in, and it's a culture clash. And then it's the question is, well, is it a culture clash just because culture, or is it something deeper than that surface level? And thus you're going to basically always have these populations, which, if they continue to be separate genetic populations from the native population, will will always then have a preponderance towards a behavior which is different from the host.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And this is where I don't like making the solid yes no statements, because the science of finding certain alleles as triggers for behaviors and what sorts of frequencies those alleles have to hit within a population in order for something to manifest more or manifest less, and the exact contribution that the environment has, the exact pressures the environment has to exert upon it, upon someone who has those specific alleles in order to manifest a behavior, as per the addiction example. It's a very, A, complicated equation, and B, still kind of fledgling. And the reason I think that it's becoming really contentious now and something that people want to get into now is because there is, I think, a very distinct feeling that we have to take action on it now, or the environment that we're in Europe, the culture that's been created in Europe, will not be recoverable. So if you said, for instance, like, because democracy seems to be a European creation, like it doesn't seem to exist amongst any other genetic population, which throws up the question, well, is there something about the genes, about the allele frequencies of European populations that encourages that pattern of behavior? Now, we know that there's a social sensitivity allele gene, so is it simply a lack of that particular allele which makes Westerners more independent-minded and less collectivist? Perhaps. But if that is the case, then, well, what happens if we get half of the population with, say, an improved or a specific social sensitivity allele in the same area as that? Mm-hmm. Well, what's going to happen then? Well, suddenly democracy might not work, because you've got a bunch of people who are simply not inclined towards that way of operation. Now, that's not saying they can't operate in that way. Sure, they absolutely can. You can learn. Your brain can adapt and take on new ideas. Neuroplasticity is a thing. This is how humans work. But it starts, it puts that into question, like, how much can we mingle this together, and will this will these stripes that we're having continue, or will they actually just eventually smooth over once the populations kind of just mingle together? Which is then, if the populations aren't mingling together, well, if the behavior is then stemming from some genetic trigger, there might be a possibility that it will never actually mingle together.
Well, my experience comes from Latin America and is completely different. It's non-academic, but the experience on the ground. There are, in Latin America, the social divisions are razor thin. In certain countries, I can speak from experience about Chile, the social divisions, class and racial divisions are sliced finer than the finest bologna, okay? I mean, compared to the UK, Britain is like, a completely communist, classless society compared to the social divisions in Chile, right? And it seems in other Latin American countries that I've been to, something similar is going on, where you have different social classes creating different strata of the society, socioeconomic strata. And you have predominantly European people of predominantly European descent who are really in control of industry and the political machinery. But also you have in certain countries like Peru, where you have Japanese and Chinese populations that are also beginning to accede to the levers of power. For instance, in Peru, they had a Japanese president, Alberto Fujimori, who was, he was an exceedingly corrupt individual, but that's that's besides the point insofar as this conversation is concerned. The Asians seem to be rising in that arrive into these populations. Now, look at recently, just today, as a matter of fact, I don't know if you happen to see it, Black Pigeon Speaks produced a video called The White Left, Asian experience, and how the pejorative soy boy or a bugman as in East Asia is the white left. That is a leftism that is white and is just stupid and doesn't quite understand what the reality is that's going on. But in that video, it's a very good video, which I highly recommend to our listeners. But in that video, he goes into a little track about how in France, a lot of the ethnic minority populations are starting to hate on not just the white majority in France, but also on the Chinese minority, because the Chinese minority in France is doing economically and socially very well. They're quiet and they keep to themselves, but they're very diligent and working very hard, and they are advancing and they're rising in the socioeconomic ladder among the other populations. Now, Black Pigeon Speaks wanted to bring this up because he was interested in highlighting the issue of how minority Asians in different countries are being slowly added onto the white majority as, the evil races, right? The races that can be dismissed without fear of repercussion, right, by the left. But it seemed to highlight a fact that the East Asian populations in Europe are doing very, very well. And they are integrating, or perhaps not integrating, but at least they're going up the ladder. And from my own experience in Latin America of the social stratification based on race, but determines it, but rather that it seems as if people tend to fall into those categories, socioeconomic categories. And not explaining myself very well, but I hope that you're understanding my point. My thinking is that in Western Europe and the Americas, North America, something similar will be happening, where you will have certain races that always wind up at the top and certain races that always wind up at the bottom. And race will become sort of like an effective class marker. And that's how the future will be. That seems, which is sort of like basically Brazil 2.0 insofar as Western Europe and North America are concerned. Agree with this future for these populations? Or do you envision something completely different?
Well, this is then the point, and I suppose this is the civic nationalist argument versus the ethno-nationalist argument. It's, will this simply be a thing? Everyone will eventually move and spread out everywhere, and race will become this this stratifying force throughout society, where representation will exist on bell curves across the entirety of the population, and because they're different, the distribution will be different? Or will people simply say, look, there are differences between people like this, and that's a thing that needs to be taken into account, and in some cases may need to be controlled in some capacity, because there won't be a need for certain social strata.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, yeah. I sort of like didn't know whether to answer that or let you continue.
Well, this is where we get into the point where I kind of run out of things to say, because it's like, I simply don't think that there is enough data on one side or another of this to draw a definitive conclusion. Because when you look at things like social cohesion, levels of trust, levels of happiness, all these sorts of things in countries, in multiracial countries, those things always score really, really low.
Yeah.
And the more diverse areas are, the lower that is, because people just seem to be naturally somewhat distrustful of each other. And in some cases, that's socially reinforced. In other cases, it isn't. And this is where I would love the experiment ethnostate versus IQ state. Could an effectively higher IQ state overcome those social differences, or would those social differences persist, but you'd end up with a far better or far stronger economic nation as a result? And could that then carry it over? These are things that I do not know the answer to. And I think this is where people just kind of have to effectively pick one or the other. I think that's what's causing so many problems, especially in places like Europe now. It's you've got people who are just sort of saying, no, we have to take some sort of ethnic interest in this because culture may very well spring from the biology of the people, or we have to, or there's other people just saying, well, we just have to go with it, go with the melting pot, and hope that diversity being our strength will somehow overcome the adversities.
I think that the path that we're currently on is a complete disaster. And it's quite obvious that nobody, 30, 40, 50 years ago who set the wheels in motion for this policy or for this situation ever thought that things would arrive at this point. On the other hand, it seems long-term. I'm talking really long-term. I'm talking in the hundreds and thousands of years. I think it is detrimental to the human population to have it so totally settled where, English people are English people and French people are French people and Chinese people are Chinese people, and none of them ever move. I mean, that kind of stasis, I think it is a bad thing for the human population in the long run. You need movement. You need to mix it up. So, cultures die. I love Western culture. Western civilization has brought so many things to us in every regard, in every aspect of our lives. If it is simply not strong enough to endure over time, we should prop it up like an infirm man who's who might be better off just letting it go, like one of those poor people who are put on life support for years and years, even though they really can't exist without that life support. No, I think a culture should be allowed to flourish and to die as it sees fit. I want to mention briefly here this novel that I read recently, which I'd heard a lot about, but never gotten around to reading, which was Michel Houellebecq's Submission, which came out in 2015 amid enormous controversy. The novel is basically about how France elects its first Muslim president, and this Muslim president reaches the presidency with a combination of his own party and help by the socialists. And France becomes a Muslim state. And it was released, at the time that it was released, it was called a satire. I don't quite know why it was called a satire, because my understanding of satire is that you sort of exaggerate one aspect to highlight a problem, a political or social issue that you want to have highlight. This novel doesn't really exaggerate anything. I mean, it seems very much true to life insofar as what's happening right now. Who call it a satire, I don't think that they know what the word means, or they are fooling themselves as to the reality that Houellebecq was portraying. But anyway, the novel is very interesting because it's a novel of ideas as opposed to a novel of characters and events. It's fairly plotless and trivial insofar as its plot. It's basically the first-person narration of a university professor in his mid-40s. And he watches as the political situation changes. This Muslim president is elected. The French society begins to shift decisively towards being Muslim. And the name of the novel, Soumission, submission, is of course a play of words because the word Islam means submission. Submission, of course, to God. But in this case, it is the French culture that is exhausted and essentially submits to a stronger, healthier, more dynamic culture. Now, I personally am, I don't like Islam. I think that it has a lot of aspects that I find horrifying. But at the same time, I can't help but be realistic and realize that as a culture, whether we like it or not, it is more dynamic. It is more aggressively growing, whereas our Western society, the people who are in charge of it, the leads of it, the people who are its gatekeepers, who are its guardians, no longer know how to defend it, how to uphold it, how to proselytize Western civilization. And it seems to me that in the West, we no longer believe in our own culture anymore. We look at it ironically and sort of like don't even know how to come to grips with it. And we fall, like every human being falls prey to the will of a stronger individual, of a stronger movement, of a stronger personality. And it seems as if Western civilization is falling to the sway of Islam at this time, which seems to be the more dynamic culture. That's my view of it.
I'm not sure if I'd agree that Islam is more dynamic. I just think it's more aggressive.
Well, isn't that the same as a different word for dynamism?
If something were to be dynamic, I would consider it to have abilities to change and to adapt to situations, which Islam doesn't. Islam just has one mode of operation, and it is from the base up. When you're a minority, you hide yourself, you conceal your faith. When you
Taqiyya,
Taqiyya and Tariya. When you start becoming a larger part of it, you start causing trouble and you start trying to enforce your own will. That to me isn't being dynamic. That's one mode of operating.
Right.
So I don't think
I want to be clear here. You know, I don't like this state of affairs, but it seems realistic to appraise it and to look at it as this is what's going on. I want to emphasize that it's not something that I prefer. On the contrary, but it seems what's going on. Now, as to what you're talking about, dynamism, that's something that it has the ability to adapt to a given circumstance. But wouldn't you agree that a culture or a set of beliefs that has the force of will to make its environment adapt to itself, that has a certain I don't know how you would call it then. It's, yes, certainly aggressive, but it is a form of dynamism. It is a form of health when you can adapt your environment to suit you. And that used to be a quality of Western culture.
Well, it's not adapting the environment. It's well, it is, but it's not dynamically adapting it. It's adapting it to how it already exists in other places. It's simply spreading it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. It seems it's academic, you know, as to whether it's dynamic or you want to define dynamism this way or that way. The fact of the matter is that they are aggressively expanded. They are an invading force. And yes. I, for one, as a Westerner and one who is immensely proud of the Western culture and that I happen to be a small part of and at the same time get so many benefits out of, because it is a remarkable culture, you know, objectively speaking. And I want to defend it. And I have the resources to defend it. But it seems as if the intelligentsia, the political and financial elites, nobody seems willing to take up that. The alt-right seems to be the only group of people who want to defend it, who see value in it. I see value in it, and I want to defend it. And so that's how I wind up drifting politically more towards the alt-right than to any other political factor, to circle back to your original question that we were starting. And that's more or less where I'm coming from. I want to stop the Muslim invasion, but I have to recognize that they are, at this time, more aggressive. And the people supporting Western civilization do not seem to have the stomach for it's necessary to check the Islamic advance. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's that the people who are in positions of power to do something to defend Western values aren't actually able to. And I think actually that the Western values is part of the problem. Because in the West, we have the idea of everyone as individual, such that it is. And it's everyone is an individual. We can't treat different people differently. Everyone must be treated completely the same. Well, the problem with that is then that you end up in this scenario where it's, well, we can't actually treat people who have a different set of values differently from people who have our values because that's one of our values. And it's like, but if you wanted to stop that person with those different values from taking over your values, which they are set on doing,
Mhm.
you have to. You have to. You'd have to either treat them differently or to treat your own in-group with some degree of preference. And this is why I think, you know, ethno-nationalism is something which is rising, because people are simply saying it's the only solution.
Yeah.
You know, we can't treat our out groups the same as we treat our in groups, because they're playing by a different set of rules.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I completely agree. And I see the logic of your position that the ethno-nationalism and a certain degree of anti-democratic sentiment is necessary in order to save the individualistic democratic ideal of Western civilization, which, of course, would lead us to conclude that Western civilization does not inherently have the ability to save itself.
As it stands at the moment, I would agree. But this is why we're seeing a rise. It's not only of the alt-right that's rising, it's just the right in general is rising. There's just a mass polarization of politics in a lot of Western countries now.
Yeah.
And I think that is what's going to sort of determine things over the next few years. Will that right-leaning pushback actually rise to a point where they'll be able to wrestle some sort of control from the ineffectual people who are just sitting around going, well, we can't treat those people this way because our values say otherwise, to then just be replaced by someone who says, look, if we want things to continue as they are, or if we want things to continue as they were 50 years ago, we need to start reversing what's been happening. And by virtue of what's happened, it's going to have to be something done along either a religious line or an ethnic line. Like, there's no getting around that. If people of a certain race or people of a certain belief have moved to an area and they're causing problems, you must target them based on those features. Because if you don't, you can't do anything.
Yeah. There's the other obvious problem that you essentially have fifth columnists in the Western democracies in the form of left-wing politicians, because it is to their benefit to have as many immigrants come into their country and vote for them, because the new immigrants tend to vote as a bloc for ethnic leaders, and these ethnic leaders and leftist politicians have come to either explicit or tacit understandings as to whom they will support. You see it with the voting patterns, where you have Muslims voting overwhelmingly for Labour Party candidates in certain districts. And it's quite obvious what's going on, that there is a coordinated effort, increase the immigrants, the allotment of immigrants, and that immigrant group will vote for that politician, who in turn asks for more, a rise in the immigrants from that particular group, and it goes on and on. And it seems to me that they're fifth columnists, but of course, nobody can call them fifth columnists, which is essentially treason. It's politically a non-starter. People would dismiss you if you were to call, say, Jeremy Corbyn and his party treasonous for advocating more immigrants who will directly benefit them in the voting booth. Have this problem where the Western democracies are breaking down and their own rules are being used against them, and so I'm very afraid of what Western Europe. Let me rephrase this. Do you think at any point there will be some sort of like armed rebellion or something, where people come to blows over this? Do you think that the political situation, which we see is becoming polarized, do you think that it will come to a point where, it will come to blows?
Violence is inevitable.
Really?
Yes. If things keep going along this pattern, it will be. Whether it's organized or basically guerrilla ops from one side to the other, it can't end any other way at the moment. Because what's happening is you've got two groups, actually, well, it's more than two groups technically, but they're becoming increasingly polarized from each other. They're becoming increasingly distrustful from each other. They're seeing that the points of authority which should be doing something are not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
vigilante justice to me is something that's an inevitability. I mean, I said this when that guy drove a truck into a load of people outside that mosque. It's like, well,
Yeah.
what a surprise! It's you've got people attacking your people. Well, what do you expect to happen? The police at this point don't do a goddamn thing because they don't want to be called racist. They're paralyzed by the culture that we've got. So people at this point feel the need to take the law into their own hands. And as things increasingly go this way, well, what's going to happen? It's an inevitable escalation.
Yeah, well, insofar as that truck into the mosque thing, I was actually surprised that this is one of the few that I've seen so far. I'm surprised by how few there have been. Not that they're happening. I would have thought that a lot more would be happening, especially in Great Britain, considering the damage to certain groups of people that the immigrants have caused. I mean, obviously, like the sex gangs, right, and the sexual grooming, which is, I think, is horrifying. And I can't quite believe that the reaction has been so muted, the violent reaction, because it's been, incidents here or there. It hasn't been like one after the other, as we see from the opposite side. So I'm wondering if how can I put it? I understand what you're saying, that it will eventually lead to violence, but it seems that there are so many people who are, just waiting for right-wing violence, quote unquote, to emerge in order to stomp on it both as a virtue signal and as a genuine belief that is where the danger lies. I'm not sure if the right wing will ever be able to be violent to the degree that the Muslims and the leftists are violent, because it seems that the entire society is geared and staring at them and waiting for them to do anything semi-violent to pounce on them and to strip away any right, civil right that they might have in order to prevent right-wing violence.
And that's what I mean by violence being inevitable.
So you think that would be the trigger for right-wing violence?
I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure that this, if you're going to stamp on basically the only people who give a shit about their country, as soon as they give a shit about their country, at this point, they're waiting for anyone to open their mouth or hold a sign or go for a walk down a street in a group greater than 3. And that is going to start causing a lot of resentment. I think it's already starting to cause a lot of resentment. That these people are simply at a point where it's like, yeah, you can't express the opinion that you give a shit about the country that you're in and the people that are in that country, because that just makes you absolutely horrendous. You're literally Hitler. You're the worst person ever. It's the government at this point, and private institutions and academia and whatnot, they're putting so much effort into demonizing the right that I think that they are strategically basically trying to paralyze them. But I don't think it's going to happen, because all that they're going to do is push more and more people towards that side. Because it's all you have to do is look at polls of these sorts of things. The attitude of people going, again, not only alt-right, but general nationalism, general right-leaning sentiment is rising. And that's just from the people who have the balls to admit it.
Yeah.
So I think that what's going to happen is maybe there will be an actual democratic event, but since there don't seem to be any candidates who are going forward to represent that point of view that people want, things will eventually have to be done a different way. Now, I don't like the idea of that happening, but it seems like an inevitability. I mean, you can only stamp on someone's face for so long.
Yeah. No, I completely understand the logic of your position. I agree with you. It's not something, nobody wants violence under any set of circumstances. But if it's going to happen, well, we have to start thinking as to why it will happen and how it will happen. My own experience, again, I'm drawing from my own experience in Latin American coups, and I'm from Chile, and the coup in 1973 is very interesting because what happened was that in 1970, a socialist president, Salvador Allende, was elected. He wasn't merely socialist like we call socialists now. He was a hardcore socialist. He was, he was interested in implementing an essentially Maoist agricultural reform, and he was, in favor of nationalizing all industry, which he proceeded to do, nationalizing all mining, which he also did. People more or less tolerated it for quite a while, and then all of a sudden, in mid 1973, the winter there of 1973, all of a sudden it was like he's got to go, and every sector of the population essentially agreed. The oligarchs who were being affected directly by Allende's policies, and the lowest classes who everybody all of a sudden in the whole country just wanted him out, and everybody supported the military dictatorship when it took over, and that was why the military coup of 1973 was overwhelming and incredibly effective, because what started happening was that whenever any leftist cell, terrorist cell, tried to organize itself in the aftermath of the coup, it was any person who would hear would denounce them instantly because they hated them, because it had become an issue of like the whole country turned against Salvador Allende and his people and his program and the leftists, right? And so I can understand your notion that all of a sudden you just hit a tipping point and the whole thing just flips over, gone. The entire society wants them gone, and wants them gone instantly. Do you think that that could happen? And do you think that, this is what I'm interested in, do you think it could be that the democracies in the West all of a sudden decide, you know something, all of these foreigners, we want them out now, next year, now? Do you think that that could potentially happen?
Well, it's happened before.
Example?
Jews have been removed from many European states before.
Right.
Just as an ethnic group.
Right, okay, fair enough. But that caused certain traumas that, we can all agree there is actually affecting current political action. The guilt of the Western Europeans over the Holocaust is preventing them from looking at the situation clearly and preventing them from taking action. Do you think that that guilt will continue and perhaps override any impulse to get rid of all of these immigrants?
Potentially for some people, yes. But, well, this is where we're going to see, like, what is the breaking point and how many people break at the same time. If it's enough people, then it'll happen. If it's not enough people, then it'll be an insurrection, then it'll be put down.
Yeah. When do you think that this could happen?
Oh, I have no idea.
No.
Probably within the next 10 or 20 years. I'm just going to throw a really big so that way I can sit back and go, I was right. Now, please excuse me while I turn around and fire off a few rounds out of my broken window. Someone's on my lawn again.
Goddamn kids. No, I actually don't think that there is going to be an ethnic war. I at least not in Western Europe. In the United States, perhaps, but not in Western Europe. I think the Western Europeans are exhausted. And my thinking is that perhaps the World War I and World War II just exhausted Europe. I mean, the best and the brightest were killed in the First World War and then again in the Second World War, but especially the First World War. I mean, the cream of the crop of Germany, England, and France were killed and needlessly killed. And I think that the past century has been the after effects of that catastrophe. I mean, that's always been my thinking, to tell you the truth. As to an ethno war, I would actually think it would be beneficial for Europe if it were to happen, because war is always a bad thing, but at the same time, it's an element of chaos, and chaos is always good to sort of like rejigger the whole society and straighten it out, or get rid of all the cobwebs, if you will. Horribly, but I think you get the point of what I'm trying to say. But I don't think that the Europeans have the will to fight for
Yeah,
their
but
people.
Europeans have been exhausted a lot before. I mean, in Britain, we've had a few peasant revolts because people were exhausted, and it was like, oh, well, they're just going to bend over and take it. France had their revolutions. Well, they're just going to bend over and take it. Weimar Republic, oh well, they're just gonna shut up and die because they're all tired, homeless, hungry people. And then look what happened every single time. I mean, don't underestimate how incredibly violent people can become when basically they're operating from the bottom tier of Maslow's hierarchy. People can do some very, very crazy things in that situation.
Oh yeah, I have no doubt. I mean, different reasons I've seen some crazy ass shit happen. When push comes to shove, people will do anything for their survival. That's the nature of life, whatever the species may be. And so the veneer of civilization is just that. It's just a veneer, and if push comes to shove,
as soon as the power goes out, the water goes off, the internet dies, civilization, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
As soon as those things go, that civilization is very, very fragile.
Yeah.
Very fragile.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, again, in Chile, whenever there's an earthquake, they deploy the troops instantly. And from the people you would never expect a lot of times. And in their panic, they will do anything.
Yeah, well, that is the point. And that, I think, is going to be the big thing, military deployment. If at any point Europe has started seeing a big enough right-leaning backlash, how would it be quelled? Well, yeah, we've got armed. well, there is that, but yeah, we've got some pretty good police forces. They do have their armed segments, but there's not very many of them.
Mm-hmm.
If it was on a big enough scale, as soon as you deploy the military against your own civilization, against your own citizens, you're fucked.
Yeah.
As soon as you have to even contemplate issuing that order, you're done, because you basically know that about half of the military will probably just say no. Probably more than that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's I think what it's going to come down to. Will we reach a breaking point? Will the breaking point be big enough? And if it is, the police forces are already overstretched in Europe because of the problems that the migrants are all causing. It would reach a point where it would have to be like, yeah, we have to get the military involved against our own citizens. Oh shit, son.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, here's something to throw a little spice into the pot. The global economy is exceedingly fragile. 2008 global financial crisis were not solved. They were merely ameliorated and postponed. The can was kicked down the road, but nothing was fixed. And we are seeing this bubble economy, which is insane and absurd, and it is going to pop. Okay, all of these assets that are worth ridiculous amounts compared to their yields. Treasury bonds, at 1.5%. That's absurd. Okay, you have the stock market, which is just insane. It is just not real. And yet it's just chugging along on nothing but air and sentiment. And look, we have basically a Bitcoin economy. It exists on good faith, but all of this is just an illusion. And it's been an illusion that's been created by the central banks, and they've been working very, very hard for the past 10 years to maintain it. It's coming. I mean, it's baked in the cake. There's no way to avoid it. The issue is just going to become, how big is that crash going to be, and when is it going to happen? And they keep on doing everything to postpone this crash. I'm talking the European Central Bank, the Federal Reserve. I mean, they are all, crazy with fear. And China is not going to be immune. And it could very well be that China is the spark of this whole thing, because a lot of what's going on in China is just, but that's a different conversation. My point, if there's a big enough crash, I mean, something along the lines of the GFC of 2007, 2008, or bigger, because actually I think it's going to be bigger than the 2008 crash. Do you think that it would cause great poverty across every industrialized country? Employment and all the rest of it. I mean, real catastrophe, real middle class pain, middle class, working class pain. Perhaps that could be the trigger to bring about the ethno war that you're talking about.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. That's what happened in Germany.
Yeah, yeah.
And then at that point, what's going to happen? I mean, we already got a taste of that in 2008. It was, well, we'll bail the banks out. One of them will end up being nationalized and then handed back over to the bankers who ran it into the ground in the first place.
No,
maybe we could just skip that next point, the second half of that.
I don't know. I don't know. I think the next time is going to be a lot worse because, like I said, all the problems of the first one were not solved. They were just postponed. You know, all these banks, they're still bankrupt. Okay, they have been slowly trying to up their reserves, but nowhere near it. I mean, if they get a big enough hit, tubes, and the central banks are basically going to have to fake up some money to shore up all this financial system and plug in all these holes insofar as their balance sheets, because all of these assets are going to go right down the tubes insofar as valuation is concerned. And so they're going to be essentially broke. And, you know, how are they going to make it? They're just going to have to print money. And by printing money, that could be potentially game over, especially considering the problem that the oil situation, you know, Saudi Arabia is not that stable. Saudi Arabia has problems of its own, and they might very well break the deal that they cut with Simons and start accepting other currencies instead of just dollars, and that would be the end of the American economy. But okay, anyway, I'm just like dithering because I'm like too many gears in my head spinning around insofar as this whole situation. But going back to your original question, the phrasing of it slips my mind right now. Could you rephrase it for us?
Yes, I'm not alt-right, but soon will be.
Right. I want to turn your attention to something else that I'm very interested in, which is the media. Okay.
Yep.
It is just lefty as could be, and it doesn't seem that anybody there is turning alt-right, and we're seeing that division between what the media is saying and what everybody else is experiencing. The media will at any time go in this direction, or they're going to stay in their bubble.
Well, who funds the media?
Oligarchs, the consumers. I'm not sure what point you're reaching for.
Well, that's to me is just the simple question. You know, who's controlling the supply of money that the media is using? Mm-hmm. Because that will be the thing that then indicates which way they're going to go.
I still don't understand your point.
Okay. Well, okay. So who basically heads up media companies, and what is ultimately their political affiliation or their political leaning? Because that's going to be the thing which really then determines the direction that all of these media companies are going to go into.
Are you referring very gently to the quote unquote JQ?
No, I'm just referring to an actual observable fact of life. Mm-hmm. People who run organizations like this, they're either going to continue pushing their own ideology, or they will cave. And what we've seen so far is that they don't seem to care about what's actually going on. They want to push an ideology or to take one particular path. And the thing is, that path is being enabled and funded. So why would they need to change? And the point is, when you get the sort of oligarchs who run these organizations, I mean, they're international elements. They don't give a shit what happens in these individual companies, or the individual countries, I should say, because they're nowhere near it. They're so far removed. They have, they'll have no particular reason to care. It's like, okay, great. We can keep doing what we want in those countries. Once it fails, we can just go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're so buffered that to them it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that welcome to the world of the ultra rich.
Yeah, yeah. So you figure that the old established media is going to continue in this effort to stamp out the alt media and our little neck of the woods insofar as the YouTube commentariat is concerned. They're going to continue to try to stamp out any idea that they don't agree with, that is not any verboten idea. They're going to continue in that course, and the alt media is just going to wind up being this guerrilla media. That's basically your thinking.
Well, that's the pattern at the moment, and if all of the patterns that situation relies on continues, then of course it will. It's basic cause and effect. You know, at the moment we have the cause, which is the media pushing a narrative which they are pushing right now. The mass immigration problems that we're facing, the social strife that we're facing here. If those things don't change, and all of those things coming together, they are all forming this very distinct block and direction of pushing things. So alternative media sources and things more on the right like that, they are more underground. They are harder to get. They don't have the mainstream appeal or the mainstream eye like that. So unless one of the first things change, then this second tier of things underneath it isn't going to change either. So I see it as just being an inevitable continuation if things keep going the way that they are. If they don't, if things change, if large media companies suddenly say, hey, we do actually care about these really tiny markets in these one countries as opposed to the entire rest of the world, well, then maybe things will change. But who knows? Who knows?
I don't think that they're going to change. I think that they're going to continue and get worse. That the dichotomy between what the mainstream media is pushing and the reality on the ground is just going to become greater and greater. Yeah, so I'm. It was sort of like a hypothetical question, I suppose, because I don't improving insofar as the media is concerned.
Well, the other thing that you've got to consider is just potential allyship that these large media corporations and the moguls who run them have. Like, are any of them not necessarily physically, but are they metaphorically in bed with each other? And quite a few of them are, especially when you realize that a lot of the corporations which operate on this supposed free market, many of them are run by one larger parent company or a small group of parent companies. So a lot of these things which seem like they should be in opposition to each other actually aren't. And I think that's what's causing part of the problems that we're seeing now. It's, oh, okay, here's the one international element which controls, you know, X, Y, Z and all of those things. Well, to people on the ground, though, X, Y, Z, well, they're three completely unrelated things, surely. But no, they're not. So what you're facing here is basically one giant wall of things which are basically in lockstep with each other.
Yeah, my problem with one of the problems I have with neoliberal economic policy is that it currently gives gives a pass to monopoly practices. Now, monopoly is, of course, much more efficient for an economy. Issues of economies of scale. But if you allow monopolies, you crush out competition, and you start to have the obvious problem of monopoly. You have to set only one point of view insofar as a particular market is concerned. Now, the current regulatory environment is essentially pro-monopoly because their mantra has always been, it doesn't matter if there is a monopoly or an oligopoly or a monopsony or oligopsony in any given market, so long as the prices to the consumers are low enough. That's always been the mantra. Now, in the United States, I know US economic history a little bit better than European history, so, and you'll just have to take my word for this, that in the 1930s and 40s, there were agencies that went out of their way to break up supermarket chains, for instance, and made sure that they didn't grow large enough to become national. And so there were supermarket and store chains that were local. For instance, in the south of the United States, there was one called Piggly Wiggly. And Piggly Wiggly, in point of fact, was famous because they invented the modern idea of the supermarket. And they began expanding because of this. The idea of people would go with a cart, picking the goods and goods that they wanted to get, and then get to a checkout.
and pay for the goods, because before stores were organized that people would walk in and there would be a long counter, the goods behind the counter, and there would be somebody who would give the goods to the customer, right? Now, Piggly Wiggly invented this idea of the modern supermarket, and because of this, they started expanding aggressively from the South, taking over because they were able to hire fewer employees and therefore achieve higher profitability by lowering their prices, right? But because of this, because of their expansion, the government called Piggly Wiggly because it didn't want Piggly Wiggly to become a national chain, because at that time it was considered a bad thing to have any one national chain dominating any one industry, as seemed to be the case with Piggly Wiggly that it would eventually become. They were proactive in breaking the potential monopoly of Piggly Wiggly. But today, of course, that didn't happen. During the 1970s and 80s, Walmart was allowed to expand, and now it dominates every single market in the United States. Walmart is it. In a lot of communities, Walmart is the only store. And if Walmart leaves, that community is devastated because they're destroyed. Okay, now that was economically very, very efficient, but socially catastrophic, because there are no mom and pop stores in the United States anymore. There are no small shops for any good or service, especially any kind of specialized good or service, in most towns in the United States, because the Walmart came to town and took them out, basically destroyed it. It's more efficient and it's cheaper, but it's worse for the community. Okay, and I lost the point I was trying to make by this long shit. You're gonna have to excuse me, Teal dear. What the hell were we talking about at the beginning of this?
Basically large international mega corporations who are forming monopolies and beyond reproach by governments or the citizenry that they are
exactly
infiltrating, basically.
Yeah,
I can't think of a way to phrase it other than infiltration.
Yes.
That probably sounds like a massive conspiracy theorist. I just can't think of a better word.
Yeah, we'll come up with something better than that. But the point of this long digression, and it's apropos to what you were saying, is that you see, the powers that be have wanted this monopoly practice, and that's why the corporations have people by the balls, because there are very few corporations. For instance, in publishing, which is an industry I know quite well, hundreds of different imprints, but at the end of the day, there are only 5 companies, and they act in coordinated ways, which is completely, in violation of antitrust laws, but everybody knows it anyway, and they go about doing it anyway. To be done about the situation. That's how it is, because no government regulation wants to address this. Now, the problem, of course, is that, see, the right attacks any kind of regulation as inherently evil. It seems to me that there are some regulations that should be implemented because regulation per se is not inherently evil. It's only evil to the degree that it is hurting private enterprise. But if it is curtailing corporatist enterprises and destroying communities, well, wouldn't that be a good thing?
I'm certainly in favor of it. It's much as I love the idea of free market, literally everything, you do end up with basically monopolies. I see them as being somewhat an inevitability of having everything completely unrestrained. I've been a pretty big fan of the idea that governments should exist to protect their citizens and the interest of their citizenry. And while the big multinational corporation that offers things really, really cheaply is of a benefit to their citizens because it gets them cheap stuff, the problem then becomes that they don't have the ability to regulate it effectively, because then it becomes, well, the government can't piss off this mega corporation because then, well, they'll just pull out. They've effectively got the government and thus its citizens by the balls, because it's, well, you can't, we are too big to have to answer to you. And I think that's the problem.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, there's a super chat here. Quebec, thank you very much. He asked, Teal dear, love your stuff. Has there been an update about the female Viagra drug?
There is no female Viagra drug.
just reading the question. I thought that you might have done it.
No, he's referring to the Agi saga. Yes, there is an update for it. Valiant Pharmaceuticals has completed the handover to back to Sprout Pharmaceuticals along with the $25 million. So it's going to be returning to pharmacists and shelves and is going to be launching itself in Canada probably over the coming couple of months. So have fun with that, Canada. I mean, you could not let it go through and you could fight back against it. Don't buy it. Don't ask for it. It's going to be like the little image for the image board things that are used. You know, don't read Agi posts, hide Agi posts, don't respond to Agi threads. Do that, Canada, and you'll be absolutely fine.
Wait a second. I have no idea about the saga of the female Viagra, which it seems stupid, and it seems like a recipe for disaster, because I mean, I think a lot of people are going to use it basically as roofies. And
oh, well, you can't really use it as a roofie.
Okay, I don't know the mechanics of it.
The mechanics are, well, it's an antidepressant. Okay. So you can't just pop one pill of it and have an effect. You have to build it up because it basically alters your brain chemistry over an extended period of time. So if you wanted to roofie someone with Agi, the actual roofie would then be alcohol, because
good.
Yeah, like you'd actually just have to slip a shot of vodka into someone's drink or something. That would then be the roofie, because it has a pretty big negative reaction with alcohol, whereby it causes I think it was about a third of women to black out if they have alcohol with it. Yeah, all that so they can receive 1/2 to 1 better sexually satisfying experience per month.
Jesus,
that doesn't seem worth it to me. But I love Agi. It's actually become a medical case study. I can't remember where it was, but there was a medical conference where it's actually become a case study now into basically how not to do a drug, because it was a drug that came to the market because of feminists crying that they didn't have a Viagra or something. It's just, it was awful. It's just, oh, if you don't give us this drug, then the FDA is sexist. So the FDA was like, yeah, all right, fine, you can have your drug. And yeah, then all the stories came out about how it doesn't work. You know, these are all the stories that I broke like 2 years ago on YouTube. Everyone's only just caught up. It's great. It's like, oh, everyone knows that it basically came to the market because of political pressure, not because it actually worked. It bounced around a couple of companies beforehand. It was all a giant clusterfuck. But in the medical world, in the pharmacovigilance field of pharmacovigilance, it's basically now a don't do it, don't do this at all, ever. Please just stop. So I'm hoping that would be enough to prevent it from going anywhere. But since the company that now owns it, which was the company that previously owned it, Sprout Pharmaceuticals, now has their 25 million and all their intellectual rights back, well, they're going to want to make something out of it. Unless they just completely shelve it and take the 25 million and run, which is another possibility.
Oh, you know, our current society sounds like Brave New World. You know, I mean, everybody keeps on talking about, you know, 1984. It's Brave New World. Come on, what are you talking about? You know, everything medicated. Oh God, it just seems absurd. And the very notion of a female Viagra just seems just laughable. I mean, I can't believe anybody really took this seriously. But
well, that was the marketing slogan that a company called Even the Score went with. What company? It's Grassroots, supposedly Grassroots. It was actually an AstroTurf organization. It was bought and paid for by Sprout Pharmaceuticals, the company that owned the drug.
I'm so not surprised.
Yeah. What a surprise, right? The agitator thing just happens to be owned by the people who own the thing. Yeah, what a surprise. Never seen that one before. Yeah. And where was I going with that?
Oh, hang on. Quebec says, I remember your first video on that topic. You did a great service exposing it.
Thank you. Did you like the other 7 videos? It's my white whale. Anytime something happens, it's just, no, I'm putting an end to this right now. Oh. I swear to God, I'm going to be dragged to the bottom of an ocean and drown.
Why? I mean,
I'm going Captain Ahab on this thing. I think it's just going to eventually kill me.
What, this Viagra drug?
Yeah, this Agi thing. It is my white whale. I am hunting it mercilessly. And if that tale has taught us anything, it's that if you don't just let something go, it will be the end of you eventually.
Yeah, I realized that in a recent the situation that I had, that I realized if I pursued it, even though I was right, it would be the death of me. You have to know when to just walk away, just decide, this is just not worth it, because what am I going to get out of this? Not a hell of a lot. Have you considered that insofar as AG, or are you being facetious?
I think I'm being a bit facetious. I don't see how I can lose, frankly, because it's such a garbage product. It's just absolutely worthless. And it was pushed onto the market because of feminist organizations bitching and moaning like they always do. And it's basically, it's downright dangerous for women to take. And
any antidepressant is dangerous to take, I would think.
Yeah, well, they all certainly do have their downsides, but this one especially, it's great. It's like, oh, this thing is supposed to make you more horny effectively. No, it doesn't do that, like barely. One better lay a month, are you kidding me? It's not worth it. Total abstinence from alcohol, sure, why not? Oh, but by the way, it also fucks with the contraceptive pill, so that doesn't work properly anymore. So we're going to have a bunch of horny, not really horny women walking around having a slightly better sex life, more likelihood of getting pregnant, and should they just decide, hey, I'll have a glass of wine, they're going to black out. I mean, this thing is, it's rape allegations waiting to happen. It's unwanted children waiting to happen. This drug is everything wrong with the politics of sex at the moment. And yet,
but if I'm a lawyer, I'm like seeing dollar signs.
Oh god, yeah. If you're a lawyer specializing in rape and drug related things like this, you're going to be making bank off of this stuff if it ever takes off.
Yeah, hell
Unfortunately, it hasn't. That was part of the scandal of it. When Sprout sold it to Valiant Pharmaceuticals, Valiant basically hiked the price so that a prescription will cost you about $800 a month.
A month?
Yeah, they did that because Valiant Pharmaceuticals have hiked the prices of other drugs in the past, and the FBI were investigating them for price fixing and all sorts of other bizarre things like that. And basically they were in a shit ton of debt, throwing lawyers at the FBI or something to basically try and hold them off for as long as possible. And they saw Agi and all of the hype around it and all of this. Oh, it's gonna sell so well. It's gonna be amazing. Women all over the world are gonna want it. They bought into that mad fever dream from Sprout Pharmaceuticals' advertising department and bought it thinking that the profit they'd make would dig them out of a very deep legal black hole, and it didn't, because it doesn't fucking work.
Jesus Christ. I mean, the thing that I have to just comment on, that from a moral perspective, the greed of pharmaceutical companies. I remember when I was a kid, when I was like 14 to 13, and the whole Tylenol thing happened, right? That some crazy people had poisoned some Tylenol bottles, right? And the CEO at that time, he just instantly went out there and just the shelves, every single bottle in existence, just yanked them all, because he figured that it was his duty, that the profits were secondary to potentially having a product that could be lethal, because some crazy person had put cyanide in some of the Tylenol bottles, right? I don't think that kind of decision would be made today. I think that people's pursuit of profit would be, it's just one batch, just let it slide. And it seems that our society has truly gone full on, I'm going to get mine, and I don't care how many dead bodies I have to walk over in order to get my bundle of cash. me, or is that a fair assessment of the current social situation?
Well, when it comes to people running companies and whatnot, yes. I mean, I just think that's ultra rich people being ultra rich people and being greedy fucks. People on the ground, I think, yeah, they're more greedy and whatnot, but I think there's some people who aren't. It's I don't know what the ratio would be.
Not everybody, not all CEOs are like that.
Oh no, I think all CEOs are like that. I actually think all CEOs are like that, but the little guy on the street, I think maybe a bit less so, but I don't know. I reckon if you gave people enough money, they'd sell their own mother, frankly. It does seem like it would be that way for a lot of people these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I retract my previous position. I think people are just becoming selfish and everything's fucked.
Everything's fucked and we're going to hell.
Stop the planet. I want to get off. I've talked myself into it. I'm done. I'm going to the moon.
Listen, we've been going on for an hour and a half. It's been really delightful. And I want to quit while we're ahead, as it were. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me on this live stream. It's been a real delight. And before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to touch on? You know, anything that's on your mind, weighing on your mind?
I don't know. I guess I could just throw out one final question. As what do you think about the Jewish question?
I think it's a very interesting question.
Excellent. There we go. We can leave things there now. It's the perfect answer. It's non-committal. It's an interesting thing to consider because sure, why not?
Sure, why not?
Let's explore any idea from a philosophical standpoint because after all, the mark of an intelligent man is someone who can entertain a position while not having it or something along those lines.
Well, yeah, that's my thinking too, you know. And I was talking earlier in our conversation about how Western Europe is fucked and the Muslims are going to taking over because they're more aggressive and dynamic, blah blah. And I'm checking out the chat, and everyone's like saying, "Oh, you know, coach is either black-pilled or just like a race sellout or some shit like that." You can entertain an idea in it. You can check it out, observe it, examine it from every angle, and find it very interesting, but not endorse it. I mean, just talking about an idea does not mean advocacy or belief in that idea. And nowadays,
yeah, well, that's why I like to bring up the whole point about genes, culture, and whether this means that culture can be separated from people and what this means for demographics and all that stuff, because it's just an interesting idea to consider. It's like, you'll notice that at no point in the stream have I said, yes, it's definitely this, yes, it's definitely that. It's interesting things to consider because there's a lot of very interesting potential implications should one way or the other way or all of these other ways be true. I just happen to think that we're on a time limit for some of them, so we just kind of have to make a choice and go, yeah, let's go with that one. And because if we don't, then we're fucked.
Well, one of the things that really bothers me, I suppose, in the current discourse is that, you are no longer free to simply talk about a specific idea. Everybody assumes that you endorse that specific idea.
Yeah, I hate that. That's the internet drama machine, frankly. I've just come to notice that it's usually whenever you say something or there's something vaguely implied about it, and the phrase to look out for is, so you think that? Yeah, and then exactly. After that, it's just one giant straw man or a lie or a complete fabrication. It's like that notion was not even put forward, not even close. Like, how you've come to this conclusion is nothing short of mind-boggling. But you did somehow. I can imagine that there's probably going to be drama videos made about this live stream about how we're both now a bunch of Nazis or some shit because because we dared to entertain the notion that culture could perhaps spring from some genetic point, and that if that's the case, then you must protect a genetic population if that culture is deemed to have some sort of value. Like, if you want it to continue, then you must do something to preserve it, but if you don't, then you don't care.
Well, my thinking is that in the current intellectual environment, Jonathan Swift would be instantly as a potential, cannibal, basically. what do you call a cannibal who only eats babies? You know, because I mean that's what it said in the modest proposal. You know, it said, you know, to fix the Irish problem, we have to wind up eating Irish babies. You know, it was. And today, you can't get away with satire. You can't get away with any kind of intellectual, just considering an idea. Because sometimes in the very consideration of an idea, however distasteful that idea might be, you wind up opening doors to avenues that you wouldn't have considered before. And those avenues can be fruitful, more fruitful than the distasteful idea you were considering. And it just seems that in the modern internet culture that we currently have, you know, what you say is what you are, so you better be very, very careful what you say, and no jokes allowed, of course. Oh,
yeah, I've learned that the hard way several times. It's killing my motivation, but oh well.
Yeah, well,
I sort of end up in that situation where you feel like it's like, I can't do this thing, but I really want to, but I know that there are idiots on the internet.
Yes, I find myself at that
feel when too smart.
Yeah, and yeah, that feel when too smart, and you're not even that smart. You realize, and you know that's just that those few, you know, 5 or 6 IQ points above the median are going to be enough for you to be screwed. So you better just shut your mouth insofar as a particular idea, or the whole internet is going to fall on your head like a ton of bricks. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh well. But no,
you can even be a complete idiot like me, and the internet will still fall on your head. It doesn't matter.
No. My thinking is that you have to know what you're doing your videos for. What's the motivation for your videos? And once you focus on that, you know, I always thought that my handle, Coach Red Pill, is just the most idiotic thing ever. You know, I never liked it. I just think it's stupid. But it keeps me focused as to what I'm trying to achieve with the channel, right? And that is incredibly useful, especially in moments of crisis or stress, as to what am I doing with the channel, where am I supposed to go with the channel, and keeps me on track as to what kind of content I want to be producing. And yeah, so long as if you know what you're doing and know the direction that you want to proceed, then you can afford to ignore a lot of things. But if you don't have that, if you're just so like, you know, wandering forward with no clear purpose or direction, you know, and you get hit, yeah, that hit can be really discombobulating. That can really set you off and just, you know, lead you to spiral down the drain.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, I was wondering whether your mic just cut off at the end there. It's been jumping in and out a little bit sometimes.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. But anyway, listen, we're gonna call it a stream, because we've been going an hour and 45 minutes. That's pretty long for me. And so I just want to say thank you again so much for joining me.
Oh, it's been fun.
I'm so glad. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. At the end of the day, you know, talking is that. It's just, you know, figuring out interesting ideas and pursuing them later. And yeah, I'd love to have you on another one, maybe with a few other guests, and make a little party out of it.
Yeah, we will see. We shall see what happens. I've noticed that when there's more than one other person in the room, I'm one of those people. I just like to listen.
Oh, no.
I'm one of those. It's like there's 2 people here, so I'm going to just listen to what's being said, and then I'll add my point strategically when I need to. No,
I think that's the duty of the host, to draw out the quieter guests, to sort of like pay attention. It's like, I always think of it like a dinner party, that you have a bunch of guests over, and you as the host want to make sure that you draw out everybody and sort of like bring people together in a complimentary way. The best out of people, because one-on-one like this is terrific. It's a lot of fun. But at the same time, but when you're doing like multiple people, it's fun in a different way. And I've been doing it. But
sorry, just the phrasing. When you're doing multiple people, it's fun in a lot of ways.
Oh man, I walked.
So, what were you into when you were younger, Coach? How victorious were your conquests exactly?
They were very, very, very fruitful and multiplying. Oh God, I walked into that one. Oh well, but you know what I mean, right? And yes. No, we'll definitely do something. Okay, definitely do something again. Okay, so I'm going to end this giggling here on my side, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank our audience for having listened to us babble along for an hour and 45 minutes. Say thank you so much, and see you next time.